warahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's nice to be here, surrounded by the people of knowledge, in the place of knowledge, from which shouldn't come out anything but knowledge, of course. And when we live surrounded by knowledge, and when we live for the sake of knowledge, inshallah, there is nothing but barakah that should surround us, our life, our total existence. Yeah, I'm honored to be here with you, to share some of my thoughts, my perspectives about the book, which has been introduced by our sister, the Qur'an and art, architecture, and built environment. The first thing I will do is to read a paragraph from introduction of the book, which encapsulates the significance, objectives, and scope of the book. And then we will move on, elaborating on certain points. So that paragraph is as follows. This book aims to contribute towards the prospect of reviving the Islamic built environment as a theory and practical reality. It discusses a number of salient built environment aspects and features exclusively based on the Quranic worldview as the fountainhead of all wisdom and guidance. The topics deliberated are those revolving around the concepts of architecture, art, sustainable development, peaceful coexistence with the environment, decoration, aesthetics, housing, and mosques. A cluster of relevant Quranic surahs or chapters and sets of relevant Quranic verses or ayat have been identified and interpreted for the purpose. The attained results are expected to enrich the domains of the Islamic built environment theories and its codes of professional conduct significantly. They could also enhance as well as Islamize the Islamic built environment educational programs and curricula, impacting in turn on the quality and appropriateness of the occupational output of the Muslim built environment professionals. The book has 6 chapters which deal with 6 separate topics. And those chapters are as follows, also for your information. Chapter 1, the Mosque of Mischief versus the Mosque of Piety, the Islamic worldview for architecture. Chapter number 2, lessons in decoration from Surah Al-Zukhruf, gold adornments. Chapter 3, lessons in art and architecture from Surah Al-Shu'ara, the poets. Chapter 4, lessons in architecture and sustainable development from Surah Al-Nahl, the bee. Chapter 5, lessons in peaceful coexistence with the environment from Surah An-Naml, the ants. And chapter 6, lessons in housing from Surah Al-Nur, the light. And conclusion, which has been interpreted here as chapter number 7, is about the significance of the Qur'an for art and architecture. And that's the first point maybe that should be raised. We often hear and wonder about the relationship between the Qur'an and built environment. This is a very strange, peculiar phrase. Qur'an architecture, or Qur'an and art. I remember there was a conference somewhere, international conference, of course. There was a speaker who spoke about these things, but he spoke about the Qur'an and urban planning. Right? Qur'an and urban planning. And you know what's interesting? Non-Muslims were very keen to hear, right? And they were all ears, like, wow, you know, it's something new, you know, different Qur'an, urban planning. But a Muslim, there was a Muslim, well, there were a few Muslims, but one Muslim, visibly irritated, stood up and said, come on, what's the relation between God and this? From a Muslim, you see, from a Muslim. He You see, what's the relation between God and planning? What's the relation between God and architecture? Right? That's why, to raise these things is a bit, uncharted territory. Because to many people, the Qur'an is to be recited in the masjid, right? Or maybe, in the privacy of your home. Or maybe keep it to yourself. But when it comes to, built environment, architecture, art, this is, worldly realm. This is something that's related to civilizational development. The two cannot be brought together, let alone impacting one another. But that's that new level to which we have to move. If we were to revive what we claim to be reviving Islamic civilization, it's very simple. It's very simple. It's very simple, yeah. Without beating around the bush. There is no Islamic civilization without the Qur'an. Or put it even more specifically, there is no Islamic civilization without Islam. That's it. No Muslims without Islam. No Islamic civilization without either Islam or Muslims. So it's like this, you see, Islam creates Muslims. There are no Muslims without Islam. There were people when Islam came, right? There were people. But later on, Islam Islamized them and made them Muslims, right? You see, Islam made Muslims. Now, when you have Muslims, Muslims are making Muslim and Islamic civilization. In this specific context, Islamic architecture, Islamic art, and so on. Islamic art, Islamic architecture cannot be purchased, cannot be imported, cannot be copied, cannot be, taken from another planet. No. Islamic art, Islamic architecture, the realm, the universe of Islamic built environment is generated by Muslims on the strength of their Islamic worldview and Islamic values. So it's three-tier process. Islam, Muslims, Islamic civilization. We have to be clear about it. Right? Now, if we dream about having Islamic civilization, reviving Islamic civilization, Islamizing whatever we want to Islamize, without the Qur'an, we are mistaken. Hence the message of the book, by the way. Now, let's have reference to a book. Hence the message of the book. You see, there is no Islamic architecture without Islam and Qur'an. That's the message. Then we wonder, how can we draw parallels between the two? Actually, it's quite simple. It's quite straightforward. Let's immediately say this. Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see, we speak so much about him. We read so much about him. We write so much about him. But little do we pay attention to the fact that he was the one who developed a city. He created a city. When the Muslims migrated from Mecca to Medina, there was no Medina. No Medina as an urban marvel, urban phenomenon. No, there was no Medina. There was just an area called Yathrib, which consisted of several loosely interrelated settlements. Some Aus, communities over there, some Khazraj communities over there, Arabs, right? Some Jewish communities, Banu Qaynuqa, Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayza, here and there. But there was no Medina as such. Medina came when the Prophet Muhammad arrived and organized all these potentials into an urban marvel called later Medina. And you know what this means? He's the one who planned the city. He's the one who built the city. He's the one who built mosques. People built houses. They had a market. They taught environmental lessons. All the issues that are pertinent to the built environment as a whole and with which we are grappling even today. And how many times do people speak about the Prophet Muhammad as the someone who developed a city? And naturally we can simply say, what are the lessons we can extract from these experiences of the Prophet he built cities, right? He built mosques, he built houses. Let's speak modern language. He was a builder. He and people around him, of course. He was an architect, he was an engineer, he was a builder, what are the lessons we can extract from these? He was doing exactly what we do now, and that's what humans will do until the Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's human nature, it's intrinsic to what we are, humans, right? To build. Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, the moment he came to the earth, the first thing he did was build. He's the one who built the Kaaba first. That's humans. Humans and building cannot be separated. So what are the lessons, right? So anyway, so when we say Qur'an and what are the relationships, what are the things that can be taken up, we can summarize them in three or four or 5 points. Number one, the Qur'an gives us an architectural or artistic or built environment worldview. Right? Worldview. We know what worldview is. That's a very popular topic here in the university. We have a university required course called worldview. It's about worldview. Islam teaches us those invisible dimensions that make architecture architecture, that make art art. Islam is teaching us those. If you ask anybody what are the salient issues in architecture, he will speak to you about aesthetics, he will speak to you about form, he will speak about function, he will speak about environmental impact, he will speak about durability, he will speak about aesthetics. In all those issues, guess what? These are all fundamental issues in the Quranic message. All of these are fundamental in the Quranic message. These are all fundamental in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Islam is all about aesthetics. Islam is all about having a framework within which people can operate as khalifas on earth. Islam is all about interactions between people, which translates itself at a different level when we speak about housing and other components of the built environment. That's what Islam is all about. So that's the first component. Quran gives us an architectural, artistic, built environment worldview. Islam teaches us about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to operate in the realm of Allah's creation. Islam teaches us about us as people or persons in charge of construction. You see, a good architecture is not good because of architecture itself. It's because of a good architect, enlightened architect, guided architect who is standing on a strong and solid foundation. And that's what Islam gives us. Enlightening people, individuals who will create things. Things are good or bad because of people. For example, we just said architecture. Well, politics, there is no such thing as good or bad politics. There are only good and bad politicians. There is no such thing as good or bad economics. There are only good or bad economists. Likewise, there is no good or bad architecture. There are only good or bad architects and people who are affiliated with this, with the whole context. Right? So that's number one. Number two, the field of built environment is very conducive to some inappropriate dealings, actions, perceptions. It's very conducive for people to commit certain inappropriate actions. Again, I remember a conference somewhere. An architect came to speak, to present his paper. And the first thing he said, you know, we architects are arrogant people. That's the first thing he said. And that's every architect will tell you that. Even Prof. Norina is not here. Every architect will tell you that. We are arrogant people. Exactly, that's the point. That's the core of the issue. That's the crux of the matter. Architecture is a very conducive field for committing so many inappropriate actions. Either at the thinking level, worldview, which we have just referred to, or to some practical dealings with clients, with population, with environment, with anybody. It's a very conducive, very delicate issue. So only people who are qualified can do that. When we say qualified, not only in terms of education, architectural education, curricula, spiritual qualification. SubhanAllah, that brings me to the statement by arguably one of the greatest architects that ever lived, Kocha Mimar Sinan. We have heard perhaps of him, Kocha Mimar Sinan. the state architect of the Ottoman Empire, when Ottoman Empire was at its pinnacle. It was the world's superpower at its peak. And the state architect, chief architect was Koçan, Marsinan, some of the greatest masterpieces in Turkey, even in Bosnia, wherever there was Ottoman Empire, are executed one way or another by this great man, Koçan, Marsinan. So anyway, definitely one of the greatest in Islamic civilization, and some people will go a step further and say perhaps one of the greatest in the history of human civilization. So anyway, one of the greatest, right? One of the greatest. This is very important because we listen to the greatest. We don't listen to mediocre people with mediocre backgrounds. So what did he say? He said, architecture is a very difficult profession, very complicated, very demanding because of its multi-tier, multi-level operation when it comes to life. So it's a very difficult profession, he said. And then he said, he who wants to practice it correctly, mind the words, not just to practice it, because many people practice, but he who wants to practice it correctly must be above all pious. SubhanAllah, look at the style, look at the language, look at the vocabulary. He who wants to be a good architect must be pious, must have taqwa. Now, who did say this? Not me. That's why his background was very important. Not me, not you, not anybody in this room. One of the greatest in the field, perhaps the greatest. The first requirement, not the only of course, not the only of course, but the first requirement for practicing architecture correctly is taqwa. Piety. Piety. You know what? Imagine you say this to today's architects. Imagine this is an assembly of architects. Again, we talk about PAM, for example, an architect Malaysia. Imagine, this is an assembly, a congregation of architects, and you tell them, you know what, brothers? The first thing we need as architects, the first thing we need is taqwa. I don't say wallahi, but almost everybody will say, this guy's crazy. I don't want to swear, but almost everybody will say, this guy's crazy. But that's the point here. See, that's the point. That shows how much we have departed from the true ways. Who said this? The greatest in the field. Right? The greatest that graced our civilization, human civilization, said this. It's a very demanding. That's why you need these specifications. Not just going somewhere, get a quick online degree, and here you are changing the world. It's so demanding. So therefore the first requirement is taqwa. Taqwa, piety. Now, I know where he got it. You see, we have just said, Qur'an furnishes us with this architectural worldview. Actually, when Sinan said this one, he only paraphrased a verse of the Qur'an. Now look, when Qur'an speaks about the masjid in Quba, the first masjid built in Islam, Masjid of Quba, when the Prophet migrated from Mecca to Medina, prior to landing in Medina proper, he rested a couple of days in Quba, where it was sufficient for him to establish a mosque. That shows how Muslims were desperate for this institution to operate, to facilitate the implementation of the Islamic message, right? So they built the Masjid Quba, right, Quba. Later on, Munafiqs, they built another masjid to rival this masjid and therefore cause some discord, confusion among Muslim Masjid al-Dirar. But anyway, when Qur'an speaks about these developments in Islamic civilization, in the experience of the Prophet ﷺ, Qur'an says, dear brothers and sisters, and what is Quba Masjid? Is the first masjid the Prophet ﷺ built while developing, urbanizing the marvel called Medina. We just said the Prophet is the one who developed the city. The first step, the first undertaking, enterprise of his was developing Quba Masjid by the Prophet. Who was now, we can say, who was the architect, who was the brain behind this? The Prophet himself. and the greatest generations of Muslims. Now, how does Qur'an describe this masjid, which is to be a prototype, an exemplary institution for all of us until today's time and until Yawm al-Qiyamah? So Qur'an says, this is a building. This is a building that has been established on the foundations of taqwa. And Ridwan min Allah. And Allah's Ridwan, Allah's pleasure. See now, if you look at it from an empirical perspective, just talk what you see. What do you see? You see a simple structure. You see maybe it was just an enclosure, roofless enclosure, unpaved enclosure. That's what you see. But everything Islamic is much deeper than that. Everything Islamic is much more profound than that. So Quran speaks, you see, it doesn't care about being an enclosure, simple, sophisticated, refined. It doesn't care about this. Right? Quran says this building here is a revolutionary experience. It's a revolutionary approach. For it has been built, based, established on the premises of taqwa and Ridwan min Allah. Sometimes when I speak to students, I tell them, what does it mean that a building is established on the foundations of taqwa? And that's it. Let's go home. Let's contemplate for weeks. That's how everything Islamic is, dear brothers and sisters. Islam is not even three-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional. It's not one-dimensional, straightforward, simple thing as empiricists want us to believe. I mean, subhanAllah, look at this, look at this. This is what Quran tells us. This was a revolution in built environment. This approach, that's what Quran tells us. That's why we say the golden age. The best age, including built environment, regardless of its simplicity, form-wise, was a revolution, was a breakthrough. That was that aspect of mercy to mankind. We say the Prophet ﷺ is rahmatan lil alamin, right? He's mercy for mankind. This also manifests itself in introducing different dimensions to civilization building. So it's remarkable, it's a breakthrough. But these empiricists, these one-dimensional, boring people, let's even call them scientists, when you read their books, and library is full of them, unfortunately. When you read their books, they will tell you explicitly like this. I will paraphrase. Islamic architecture started, for example, with the masterpieces of the Umayyad Khalif al-Walid bin Abdul Malik. There was nothing before. There was some primitive, this is offensive word. There was some primitive approach, attempt, contributions by Muhammad himself, and his successors, blah, 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 blah. You see, for them, for these boring, one-dimensional people, Prophet Muhammad did nothing. Quran says, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did everything. He did everything. For architecture is not to have a wall. Good architecture is not because of a wall, because of a roof, because of a ceiling, because of a carpet. That's not a good architecture. Of course, it's an important aspect, but whether it's good or not, no. That's very low in the very elongated list of criteria. It's like you and me, you are nothing in the sight of God, whether you are white or black. That's irrelevant as far as God is concerned. Whether you are having an expensive jacket or cheap, that's irrelevant as far as the criteria of who you are. Whether you are good or bad, it's completely irrelevant. Which car you are driving, which color is your scarf, this is irrelevant as far as Allah is concerned. As the Prophet ﷺ beautifully said, why am I complicating it? Allah doesn't look into your shapes, your colors, but looks into your hearts and your deeds. But again, to those boring people outside, that's everything that matters. Everything that matters is the color of your scarf, the type of jacket you are wearing, right? The car you are driving, that's for them everything. Well, this shows how much the worlds are apart. So anyway, so Quran tells us this very masjid was built on the foundations of taqwa and ridwan min Allah. Now, the masjid that was built by hypocrites in Medina, and by the way, this is the material of chapter 1, the mosque of piety and the mosque of mischief, introducing the worldview for architecture. So there was another masjid, Masjid al-Dirar, built by hypocrites. Now again, looking from our material perspective, those masjids were alike. Right? The Prophet's masjid was definitely, you know, roofless enclosure, nothing really remarkable, nothing special, nothing sophisticated. The same masjid also looked the same. Right? Plus minus, it looked the same. On the face of it, you look at them, you cannot set them apart. But Quran says no. This masjid is, you see, the best. This is the masterpiece. Right? It is a masterpiece. Why? Because it was built on the foundations of taqwa and ridwan min Allah. Right? Taqwa, piety, and Allah's pleasure. Everything from the moment, from the word go, till the execution of the mosque, everything was based on the spirit of piety towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah furthermore explains and says, فِيهِ رِجَالٌ يُحِبُّونَ أَن يَتَطَهَّرُوا. In this masjid are people who cleanse themselves. You see, it is people that grace this masjid. It is people that are making this masjid what it is. Therefore, it's a masterpiece. Now, on the other hand, we have Masjid al-Dirar, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again presented this Quranic terminology, Quranic theory of built environment. It says, this masjid is built on shafa, jurufin, harim. This one is ala taqwa wa ridwan min Allah. This one ala shafa, jurufin, harim. This masjid, on the other hand, was built on the edge of a sand cliff. Like on the edge of a bank, which is almost about to collapse. Imagine, you know, when you build a building, you know, one of the things you have to do is environmental assessment, you know. You see, you know, the stability of soil, the nature of soil, the impact on people, environment, soil, you know, all these things, rivers, right? So if there is any problem with the stability of the ground, you don't build there. But Allah tells people who have adopted this approach to building, it's like building on the edge of a cliff, sand cliff, which is about to collapse anytime. And then it will collapse with people inside those buildings into hell. Now, look how Quran relates things here. That's why, by the way, these few ayat, who is interested beyond the level of just, you know, knowledge, maybe who is interested in the field itself, these few ayat in the Quran, very few ayat, are more than sufficient to develop a comprehensive theory of Islamic architecture in particular, and Islamic built environment in general of a PhD quality. So look how Quran relates the idea of people, individuals, buildings themselves, people's conduct, and the ultimate faith, ultimate destiny of people themselves associated with that building. And that building will collapse with people inside those buildings into hell. And then furthermore, subhanAllah, look at this psychological component. Furthermore, Quran says, this building of theirs, referring to the munafiqun, right, to the munafiqun, it says, this building will constantly be ribatan. In Arabic, ribatan means doubt, skepticism. Again, you see, not just people, behavior, a spiritual dimension, ultimate fate, destiny of a people. Quran brings into the picture even the psychological dimension that buildings generate and impact upon people. You know, every building has its psychological impact. When you enter this library, you feel an aura. You feel something impacts your being, your mind. When you go to masjid after this for Jummah, you feel the same thing but different type. Again, there is an impact, there is an aura, there is a feeling, there is an emotion, there is, but different completely from what you felt in the library. When you go to our restaurants, again you feel something, but definitely different from what you felt in masjid. That's how buildings are. There is psychology of architecture. I don't know, very poorly explored field and discipline. Psychology of architecture. And Qur'an, subhanAllah, look, Qur'an brings it up, man. That this building is the perennial source, perennial, everlasting source to these people of ribatan, skepticism. They have created this building due to the skepticism in their hearts. Now, this building of theirs is the representation of their inner state. And now, to make the cycle complete, right? This building now will sustain their pitiful psychological state, which is ribatan ila an taqatta'at bihim al-qulub, as Qur'an says, until their hearts are cut off, which means until they're dead. Right? Until they die, which again, you see, represent the impact, the power of built environment it has upon us. As Winston Churchill once said, we build buildings, right? We build them, we initiate the whole process, but then once we build them, once we start occupying them, they start controlling us. It's a beautiful statement by a politician, by the way. Politician, right? That doesn't mean, nobody can be architects except architects, right? So you see, we build buildings, but once they are done, they control us. But again, it's so beautiful. Look how beautifully Qur'an elaborates the matter, relating it to the rest of dimensions of built environment. WQA, right? Yes. Okay. Okay, moving on. I mean, it's a vast subject. It's a notion of wisdom. As we have said, we like to say Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is everything to us. We like to say that. That's what we learn in our, when we are small in Kondo, in Surah, But then when it comes to real life, we wonder sometimes where those things are. Right? Quran is everything to us, right? And Quran is that inexhaustible fountainhead of wisdom and guidance. And we are entitled to ask, where is this in so far as built environment is concerned? Right? Where is this? Where is this inexhaustible power, inspiration, guidance of the Quran when it comes to building? Architecture, art. We actually deprived this, that, look, built environment is to be enjoyed. Art, subhanAllah, art. It's a noble enterprise. We are to enjoy art. We are to enjoy buildings. Why? Look, we say we are supposed to enjoy life, but not as those people do. We are supposed to enjoy life as we as Muslims are supposed to enjoy. Now, what is built environment architecture? What are these? These are frameworks for life. These are frameworks for life. Now, whatever life is, that's what built environment is. See, we conceive it, we build it, we live in it, we enjoy it. We impact it, it impacts us. Yes, it's to be enjoyed. Yes, to be enjoyed. We have killed this power of enjoying built environment. We have killed the power of art. And we have relegated art to people who are not up to the task. To us, artist is somebody who is half naked jumping on the stage. And we call him an artist. I'm sorry, that's not art. That's insult to art. You see, we don't practice art, right? Artists are actually hijacking and they're doing, all this haram stuff. And we call them artists, right? No, I'm sorry, that's insult. That's insult to art. So anyway, so these things are to be enjoyed, right? So when you look at the Quran, when you go through it with this proper mindset, you will see what it means that it is inexhaustible. Because our souls are insatiable. We can never have enough of the truth, right? That's because this is in us. Soul is that heavenly Allah's component in us. That's what soul is, right? So therefore, we are not satiable. We always want more and more, right? Now, if we activate this potential in us and approach the Quran in the proper mindset, you will see this love affair. You are the one who will never have enough, and Quran is the one who never gives. It's infinite treasure. You will see how it blossoms and it moves from strength to strength. It requires only an open mind, readiness for it. And somebody says, subhanAllah, beautifully. He said, but, we say Quran is a miracle, right? But he said, one of the dimensions of the Quran is a miracle, is that it gives you as much as you want. No more, no less. Quran gives you as much as you are prepared to receive. No more, no less. Beautiful. Exactly. There are people who study Quran whole life, they die as kafirs. Right? There are Orientalists, there's a science, right? There are people who study Quran whole life, and they die as kafirs. They read Quran more than me and you, right? But they got nothing. Why? Well, exactly because they didn't want anything. Right? They did not want anything, that's why Quran gave them nothing. It's a fair, right? It's a fair assessment. You didn't want anything, so you won't get anything. But there are people who come across a verse, it turns their life upside down. Right? Sometimes when you hear those touching stories of converts, you sometimes hear these things. I just heard half an ayah, and that's it, right? Exactly. You wanted it, man. And Quran gave it to you. Just by means of Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. You wanted it, so you got it. Right. So now, if we have this proper approach, insofar as this particular field is concerned, we will see it's everything. Everything is there. So we have said, worldview, right? Worldview. Prevention of vices is very much, we have said, fertile ground for those negativities associated with the built environment. Quran keeps these in touch, under control. Now, there is another ethical component. And again, the built environment is very much a reflection of behavioral patterns. Again, just as our worldview reflects itself onto the physical world, the same goes to our behavioral inner patterns, our personal things. They are reflected onto the physical world as a whole, a part of which is built environment. Subhanallah, subhanallah. You see, when Quran speaks, again, we speak about ancient civilizations, ancient, dynasties, ancient peoples, ancient prophets. And Quran speaks about these and give us, again, infinite lessons. And some of those lessons, again, which fly under the radar, are architectural lessons. Lessons in art, lessons in built environment. I mean, when you, for example, study the story of the people, Aad, to whom Prophet Hud was sent, or people, Thamud, to whom Prophet Salih had been sent, there are some remarkable things. Remarkable. And make no mistakes, this is the dawn of human civilization. Adam, Idris, Nuh, Hud, Saleh, right? You see, this is the dawn of civilization. Yet Quran speaks about these remarkable lessons. And again, if we follow this flat, one-dimensional, empirical knowledge that is served to us, this is the age when man was living in a cave. SubhanAllah, this is the greatest joke man could have invent. But this is, according to those standards, this is the time when people were supposed to be in caves, right? The dawn of human civilization. When they operated with, those basic tools, right? Basic tools. These were sophisticated times. Why? Because, look, sophistication is fundamental to what man is, to man's given purpose on earth. Adam, the first man, was the most sophisticated person. Again, if we judge by the physical appearance of things, we'll have a different story, but that's again somebody else's consumption, not ours. Adam was the greatest man, the most sophisticated, most civilized man. Why was he most civilized? Because he succeeded in his life mission, and now he's enjoying himself in Jannah. Exactly what I want and what you want, and what you pray for all the time. He's my role model, because he succeeded in his life. I wish I can do that as well. So anyway, so Adam. Now, for example, you see the Prophet Hud and his people, Aad. Again, it's the dawn of civilization. Quran admonishes them, telling them, for example, to make this long story short, it says, وَتَبْنُونَ بِكُلِّ رِيعٍ آيَةً تَعْبَثُونَ. So now Prophet Hud is speaking to them, right? Correcting their ways, advising them, trying to save them from the edge of the sand cliff with which they can easily collapse into the abyss of hell. So he's telling them, "وَتَبْنُونَ بِكُلِّ رِيعٍ آيَةً تَعْبَثُونَ." Prophet is speaking to them, right? And you people, you are fond of building landmarks. Landmark, ayah. Ayah means sign. Sign in architecture is a landmark. Right? Icons. Tallest building, tallest twin building. You know all this terminology we have today. You see, you are building landmarks on every elevation. بكل ريع, ريع is elevation. On every elevation you are building landmarks for your own amusement. Not because you need these buildings. Not because you need them. Not because you want them. But just because you have adopted the wrong path. You are building them just for the sake of arrogance. For the sake of challenging maybe the physical order of things. For challenging me as the prophet who came you with a different aspect of living. You don't need this. You see now, furthermore, after this, the same prophet who will tell them, and then what else do you do? وَتَتَّخِذُونَ مَصَانِعَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَخْلُدُونَ. And you are building these sophisticated, fine structure in the hope of attaining immortality. Brothers and sisters, again, this is the dawn of human civilization. Dawn of human civilization. As an Arab scholar said, Fajr al-Hadara, Fajr, the morning, Subuh, the dawn of human civilization. You are building this sophisticated structure, hoping to attain immortality thereby. Again, see, nobody is against buildings, right? Nobody says this building is haram. No, you cannot, there is no such a thing as buildings being haram. There is no such thing, right? Or this is not haram, this is, no, there is no such thing. Here, the Prophet is not condemning buildings. Remember, he's condemning people behind those buildings. Perceptions that underpin those buildings. World views that are navigating through the maze of, all this process of construction. That's what's evil. That's what's evil. That's what he's talking to them about, right? And then later on, you see, Hud, Saleh, again, still dawn of civilization, Saleh and his people, Thamud, again, in the same vein, Prophet Saleh is telling them, وَتَنْحِتُونَ مِنَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا فَارِهِينَ. And you're carving out from rocky mountains, buildings, houses, farihin, on the premises of arrogance. Again, this is the time. Science tells us this is Stone Age. Man is in caves. Allah said no. Imagine, we have Malawati mountains. You see, actually the top is a rocky mountain. You can call this rocky mountain. You see the top is rocks, right? Imagine now what technology it will require to make a settlement carved out from those mountains. Imagine. Exactly, that's why after this, when you look at those mountains, think, imagine what technology will be necessary for us to create, to carve out, Qur'an uses the word carve out, a settlement in those rocky mountains up there. Imagine technology of 21st century. Yet this is the dawn of civilization, come on. This is now for the sake of, linking built environment and civilization, which means everything we are told of human civilization is questionable at best, joke at worst. Almost everything. Almost everything. Everything is to be rewritten. Let's use IIUM's terminology, Islamized, right? So anyway, it's a long story. We said we'll try to cut it short. Maybe we can stop here, right? And see if, questions. Jazakumullah khair, thank you so much, and sometimes forgive me, sometimes, if I say something inappropriate, Jazakumullah khair. How to phrase the question, then phrase the answer. Like this. Islam speaks, this is a bit of semantics. We like to say, as an introduction, we like to say, for example, in the field of civilization, we like to say civilization is not our concept. It is the introduction. Huh? Civilization is a term invented by the Western world in the 18th century to serve their agenda. Now let's be a bit audacious. We have nothing to do with this civilization. It has been imposed upon us. Sometimes we even say, Ibn Khaldun speaking about civilization. No, I'm sorry. This is an insult to the man. Ibn Khaldun never spoke about civilization. How could Ibn Khaldun speak about civilization in 15th century when the concept of civilization was created in the 18th century? It's something like P. Ramlee being IIUM alumni. Right? If I say P. Ramlee is IIUM alumni, you know your reaction, right? So anyway, so just a bit of introduction. Now like this. Architecture as a specific, well-defined science, discipline, is a recent phenomenon. Of course, it's based on some words which were in articulation, but they didn't mean specific scientific discipline. Now, in the beginning, there was only the idea of building. We just said Sinan, even we did injustice to Sinan when he said chief architect. Well, he was not chief architect, he was chief builder. You know, you're building because that's a need, that's what you need. That's what society needs, and you're catering to the needs of society. So people are building, satisfying the needs, roping in everybody else, and we know who's in charge, and then that's how it goes. It's a communal thing. If you want to use the word art, is the art of people for people. Now, when building became architecture, that's when problems started. Shall I say that's when the whole hell broke loose. Just like when human development became civilization, that's where all problems started. When building was converted into architecture, that's where all problems started. When it was confined to a group of specific people, serving specific agendas, serving specific objectives, when thereby society was polarized into those who practice and those who are, on the other side of the spectrum. That's where problems started. Put it this way, when Muslims were building, they were serving God. When people were building, actually generally, even outside the Muslim spectrum, they were serving God. When people started practicing architecture, they started serving themselves. That's why when you look at the history of Islamic architecture, we don't know many builders. We don't have treatises about building written in the form of scientific output. We don't have many, very few, very scant. Why? Because it was not about demonstrating how powerful, how mighty you are. What was building? Building was just a part, just a segment of human servitude to God. Just like, when you pray, when you do zikr, nobody will come now and say, you know what, this morning I prayed Qiyamul Layl half an hour. Nobody will do this. Because that's between you and God, isn't it? Alhamdulillah, may God accept it from you, and that's it, right? And it's between you and God, and that's how you're happy with it, right? Now, when building was a segment of serving society, that was when things were somewhat ideal. That's why the best architecture was the architecture of the Prophet ﷺ, because it taught us the way we are to understand, appreciate, even execute building, whatever the output is. It was in the service of people. But now when we speak about architecture as such, it's about serving somebody else. And the whole thing started when religion itself, again, just as civilization is imported to us, likewise the concept of architecture has been imported to us. 15th century, 16th, Renaissance, Enlightenment, and all these things, when man severed all his relationships with heaven, with God, humanized God, cancelled God, and started deifying himself. So anyway, again, it's a long story. Just to comment on this question, it's very difficult to say
this or that has been inspired by the Quran. It's very difficult. But I will say, the first few generations of Islamic civilization, Islamic society, when Islamic architecture seemed to be simple, actually it was most sophisticated. It was most sophisticated, and en bloc, as a whole, it was inspired by the Quranic message. Later on, when we got what we call these masterpieces, that's when people were gradually departing from the authentic, genuine message of Islam. That's why we have this idea of the golden age. But then again, the golden age is not our concept. Golden age is created by somebody else. And they will tell you golden age of Islamic art, Islamic architecture, Islamic civilization in general is the age of, I don't know, first Abbasid period, Rashid, Harun al-Rashid, Ma'mun, Amin, and so on and so forth. This is again the judgment of people who worship matter. And when they see things, that's how they judge. This is the golden age of Islamic civilization because this is the age when Muslims started making things, forgetting spirit. Gradually, forgetting spirit. The age of the first generations was a time when Muslims were less inclined to making things, but living the spirit. So anyway, the question is valid, but there is so much secondary substance that should be integrated before daring to answer. But it's very difficult to draw the line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Any other questions from the audience? Okay.
My question is that you mentioned that like building in the light of the Quran, the building and architecture is built on taqwa. Like actually I want to know what is the perception of taqwa? Do you have any clarification or example, practical example, how to use taqwa here? What is the view of taqwa?
Where is it?
Thank you.
Exactly, yeah. That's why I told you. Jazakallah khair. That's why I said, I incite my students. I tell them, this is what Quran says, now what do you think? Or I tell them, now go home and have a couple of sleepless nights. Think, right? What does it mean? But actually like this to specify, right? Like this, Allah says buildings are built on the foundations of taqwa, right? And Ridwan min Allah. It's simple, actually. Well, not that simple, but yeah, it's simple. You see, building or architecture is not an act. Architecture is not an act. Architecture is a process. It's a long process. What many people mistakenly regard as architecture is the final phase of that process. The process beginning by people forming perceptions. That's the beginning of the process, right? When we start conceiving, now we need a masjid, in a kampung, we need a shopping center, we need a school, so what to do? See, this is the beginning of the process. When you have that school, that's the end of the process. Now, all these processes, sub-processes, phases, sub-phases like this, all of them must be inspired, guided, and validated by the spirit of taqwa. That's how I understand it. That means from the moment of making ideas, worldviews, the world of ideas, until the end, everything we have done must be subscribed to the spirit principles of taqwa. That's it. So we see like this, you see, that's the beauty of the Quran. You see, we said Quran is the fountainhead of everything, right? So imagine how fountain works. We have one over there in front of the masjid, fountain. You see, everything originates from it, right? And then goes away, right? But now, as far as Quran is the fountainhead of wisdom and guidance is concerned, everything originates from the Quran and eventually returns for validation and authentication. So every phase to be inspired by taqwa, ideas, planning, dealing with people, dealing with is it compatible with taqwa? Something like this, just to, when it comes to aesthetics, we have that famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says, Allah is beautiful and loves beauty, right? To some, this is the core of the philosophy of Islamic art, aesthetics. Allah is beautiful and loves beauty. So they say, what does it mean? Actually, even here, things can be simplified. It's like you see, Allah is beautiful Of course, by his own beauty, which is beyond our comprehension, right? That's the way it is. Now, everything he created is beautiful. Look at Allah's. Everything is perfection, equilibrium, is beyond the, you cannot express it, how things are perfect, harmonious, beautiful, right? Now, then Allah placed men in charge of this. You see, Allah created the universe, so beautiful, so perfect, right? Then he placed man in charge, Khalifa on earth, right? He placed man in charge. Now Allah telling him, right? Look, I have created this perfection beyond compare. This beauty, this exquisite universe. It's yours. Khalifa, right? It's yours. Now, and then it said, man intrinsically he has this penchant for building. He's inclined to build. That's what we are. Humans are, right? To create new things. Now, man will do it inevitably. We have to build. So Allah is telling him, but remember, what you do, right? What you do must be an extension of what is already there. You see, you operate in the realm of beauty, yours must be beautiful as well. But not beautiful based on your perceptions. Oh, it's beautiful because I like it, it's pink or purple. No. Beautiful, which means must be in line with the principles of Allah's beauty. Remember, Allah is beautiful and loves beauty. Now, whatever I do as Khalifa on earth as beautiful must be in line with the principles, criteria, standards of Allah's beauty. Only then are things beautiful. Right? Jazakallah khair. Brother.
Okay.
IIUM. Actually, I had the same issue about taqwa, but I have a bit elaborated about it. But again, in line with the taqwa, I talked about the psychological mind of an architecture. What would be the outcome from such kind of a mind? An architecture, psychological mind of an architecture that is based on taqwa, or any builder that is based on taqwa. In your own understanding, what are some of the, because yes, we are going to see a mosque is there, or in a structure that is invisible, because you say most of people based on what is material. In line with the taqwa, what would you look at and then say, mashallah, this building or this whatever, or this which was created by so and so, it really reflects
I understand.
the taqwa and its kind of creation.
I understand.
Thank you so much.
I understand. Jazakallah khair. Look, the world of built environment architecture is fraught with misconceptions, misunderstandings. And I believe it's more so than most other disciplines. Okay, like this. To answer this, brother Yusuf, look at us here. Who is a good Muslim? Ya Allah, answer. Who's a good Muslim? There are 50 people. Yeah? Say it.
I think it's difficult to answer.
Exactly. You have answered the question. Yeah. So anyway, see, who is good Muslim, who is good Muslim? I don't know. Yeah. People look nice, everybody is blah, 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 but Allahu Alam, right? The same goes, you see, the same goes to everything Islamic. As we have said actually a few times already, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how things look like. Of course it does. I mean, don't get me wrong here. Just like if we say, it doesn't matter how you look like, then you come in shorts, No, come on. We don't mean that. We don't mean that, right? Yeah. But in the ultimate, judgment, it doesn't matter, right? That's what we mean here. So when we say also building, it doesn't matter how actually things start. You cannot say this must, this is good because there is a dome, there is this, there is that, there is a calligraphy, there is some geometric patterns. We don't say that. But again, remember the process, right? Yeah. As long as whatever came up is resultant from that appropriate process, is okay. And Islam is not obsessed about this end product. Just as we are not, you see, again, it's psychology from somewhere else. Shall I say, Europeans are obsessed about colors. Just a few days ago, they announced they're sending, I don't know how many people to Mars again. I don't know if they ever went, but anyway, they're sending people to Mars. And the highlight is, 3 are white and 1 is black. That's the highlight of the news. 3 are white and 1 is black. White man is obsessed with colors. right? Why? Because of being materialist, being empiricist. You know, they are obsessed with things. You can see, you can touch. They are obsessed. And this obsession has been spilled over, cascaded down to us. And we are infected with this COVID-25. This is a COVID-25, right? We are affected with this virus as well. But Islam is not really concerned about this. As long as, so I remember, by the way, yeah, I mean, MC said I'm now in the history department, architecture department. I mean, history and civilization department. Actually, I was in architecture from 2000 to 2015. This is my first teacher of Islamic architecture, Prof.
I'm learning back.
15 years, my first boss and teacher of Islamic architecture, Prof. Rabian, Jazakallah khair. I remember like this, to students, I used to tell them like this. You know, in studio people give them, you know, different assignments, do this, right? Depending on the year, the level. Sometimes, you know, let's say you do masjid, you do house, this time you do, I don't know, sports complex, you know, these kind of things. Now, I used to tell them, look, when you are given an assignment, and if your final output is this is my proposal. And then you say, you ask him why, right? Why? And then if he says, well, you know, because in Japan, you know, I saw in Australia, I saw how they do, for example, in UK, you know, they do this. And then I checked some magazines of, you know, architecture. I used to tell them, I'll give you F on spot. On spot. On spot. You are given an assignment, and you just say what you have seen others doing. This is a crime in architecture. But imagine somebody else says, another student, right? Another student. Imagine he says, well, I was given this assignment, and I sat down and I thought, we are in Malaysia. I'm Malaysian, for example, or I'm Arab, I'm whatever I am, right? Now, what are my values? What are my priorities here? What do we do? What's our economic state? This one, that one. What does Qur'an say about this? I'm a Muslim, right? What are the implications? Is it private building? Is it communal building? You see, there is a host of things to ponder. And what is our technological strength? What is the budget? Right. And sir, this is my proposal. On spot A. Actually, maybe the former could be nicer, pleasing, more pleasing for the eye than the latter. But no, this is not about how things look like. It's about where are you in this. You have just committed a crime, brother. Yeah, you know, that's how I do in UK. You know, that's how I do in America. You know, I check some journals of that's a crime. Whereas you, brother, you have your identity. You have your own stance. This is you. You are a positive force in the whole process. That's what's required. And this is now, if we have to call it Islamic, this is Islamic. Because you have remained faithful to your identity, your history, your culture, your economy, your whatever, right? You know, the list is long, right? Agama bangsa negara. Jazakallah khair, brother.
Okay.
Regarding, like, what inspired you to write this topic? What was the inspiration? Which ayah? What caused it?
Are you talking to me?
Yes!
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, I'll be, yeah, because sister is here. Okay, like this. When I went to architecture in 2000, before that I was in IIK, from 98, Usuluddin. I'm actually, I'm a record holder. This is my 6th department in IIK, in IIM. 6 departments. Now, the last one is history, but this is 6 departments. So you see, it started in Usuluddin. Now I'm in history. What's going to be next? Allah. So I used to say, now I'm in history, not to make history, but to become history, right? So yeah, when I went to architecture, Qur'an was there. Also new, right? Actually, everything was new. Even in education, there was some kind of building in 2000. In 2000. So I remember I was told, you will teach a couple of UNGS courses, and we have this new course, there's only title and course outline to one called, the students fondly call it QSBE, Qur'an, Sunnah and Built Environment. Kuliya required course for everybody. Architecture, planning, the landscape, doesn't matter. Everybody must take this, Qur'an, Sunnah and Built Environment. So he said, you'll teach it. That's it, go home. And then, you know, yeah, okay. And then, you know, you start teaching somehow, you know, start teaching, and things start accumulating themselves. But to me, architecture was always a reflection of civilization. The two are twins, architecture and civilization. The two cannot be separated. Generally, knowledge cannot be compartmentalized. More so when we speak about architecture, and actually there are two. This is the mirror of this, right? So anyway, yeah, so Quran, Sunnah, and built environment, right? And I remember, by the way, a few years later, a book came up, Prophet Muhammad and Urbanization of Medina. And then all this while, there was this thought, which I had shared with you already. Quran is the source of everything, right? Right? See, Quran is source of everything. Useful, of course, everything we need. Actually, Quran says Quran is the source. Quran contains everything, right? And there are those fools who say, how come there's no durian in the Quran? Quran is everything. No. Quran is everything. It has everything we need to succeed in our life mission. That's the idea, right? So I was always haunted by this idea. Quran for everything, right? So now, to what extent does Quran inspire us, guide us, facilitate the emergence of this architecture, Islamic architecture, artistic identity? So it was always, and always, continuously, always. And I don't know, many years later, maybe 2000, I left 2015. I mean, I came back to RK. Maybe like 2013, 2014 I started. Like maybe it's time to, do something about it, with more focus, more serious, and come up with something tangible. And that's how it actually came about. But yes, I was haunted by this idea. Quran, the source of everything. Now, where does this fit? Right? Because architecture is a noble enterprise. So is art, so is built environment. These are all indispensable things for our existence. So therefore, Quran must talk about this. I remember a beautiful statement by Subhanallah Farooq. He said, look, Islam is so much concerned about family matters. You know that, right? Quran is so much about family matters, right? Men, women, children, right? So much. And then he said, what do you think? It neglected human habitat, which is a framework for family. That's his rationale for, finding the foundation of residential architecture in the frame of Islamic values. Like so concerned about family. And then he said, what do you think? Islam neglected the creation of Islamic habitat, housing, right? So there's that idea, to what extent, right? Yeah, and that's it. I mean, that's it. It's not the inspirations, you ask the questions and okay, having said all this, now maybe a bit of concluding remarks, right? Having said all this, maybe the first thing we have said, we concluded the same thing. It goes without saying, I'm sorry, there is no Islamic architecture, no Islamic art, no Islamic medicine, no Islamic engineering, no Islamic, whatever you want to call politics, Islamic human sciences, Islamic law, Islamic economics, name it, without the Quran. I know some people are not comfortable with this, I'm sorry. The first reference for each of these disciplines is the Quran. Address engineers who claim that theirs is most secular, most mundane field. The first reference for engineers is the Quran. The first reference for human sciences people is the Quran. The first reference, not reference for reading in Surah, reference for scientific field is the Quran. The first reference for medicine is the Quran. And without Quran, I'm sorry, it's a cul-de-sac. It's a, it's a block road. Jalan. Jalan Mati. Easy. It's a cul-de-sac. It's Jalan Mati. I'm sorry. For every science, if you want to inject any spirit of Islam in it without the Quran, I'm sorry. It's a failure. Don't waste your time. I'm sorry. That's why when you look at Islamic education, when you look at how in history, Muslims were taught and trained, it was all at the beginning about the Quran. Quran was the fountainhead, man. You could not have water over there if you didn't have a fountain here, right? Fountainhead must be inculcated in our hearts and minds at as early an age as possible. And then later on we move on. We talk about architecture, we talk about engineering, we talk about physics, science, no problem. But fountainhead is there, always producing the output. Without Quran, I'm sorry, There is no way forward. Because we say moving forward, leading the way, you know. No way leading the way. No way without the Quran. I'm sorry, no Quran. No, sorry. What type of Muslim am I without the Quran? Come on, it's all about the Quran. You are what you are as a Muslim because of the Quran. Islamic civilization is because of the Quran. Islamic science is because of the Quran. Everything is without the Quran. Now, we want to be something without the Quran. I'm sorry, this is a failure. We are fake from the very beginning. From the very beginning, we are fake people. I'm sorry, I mean, this is a conclusion people may not like it, but that's how it is. And then that brings us to the question, how much we are befriending the Quran. What does Quran mean to me and you? That's the question that begs the question. Now, well, since that's the issue, now what's my relation with the Quran? How many times I have read the Quran with the intention of understanding it? Of course, I don't know Arabic, but there are translations, there are tafsirs. Everything is available. Everything is at the fingertips, brothers and sisters. What will be the excuse tomorrow, the day of judgment? No excuse. No excuse. No Islamic civilization. You like it or not, no Islamization of knowledge without Quran. Nothing. People, Quran is our spiritual air. Just you want to imagine somebody's life without air, brother, I'm sorry, you are wrong, you're finished in 2 minutes, right? Likewise, everything, whatever without Quran, I'm sorry, that's the end. It's the end before you even start. Maybe that could be the concluding remarks. Jazakumullah khair, thank you so much. Yes, okay, yeah, sister. Okay.
About Kaaba being the house of God, some people say it's just a symbol. So could you please comment on the role or importance of Kaaba being perhaps when you say about piety as the foundation of an architect and building, then Kaaba as a house of God being the simplest building, but then the people, the way we perceive it as the house of God, how do you actually understand it being the benchmark of architecture?
Well, you have answered the question. By conventional standards, Kaaba is a simple thing, it's a cube. You have cubes everywhere, right? You have cubes everywhere. Cube, right? Cube. Kaaba is just a cube. Architecturally speaking, it's nothing. It's just a basic thing. Yet, we have never had enough of Kaaba. Even the Prophet when he was circulating around the Kaaba, he was admiring it so much that he kind of, got lost in the beauty of Kaaba. Why? Because Kaaba is what you see, and there is that spiritual dimension which is the representation of all this heavenly beauty poured onto the earth and somehow compressed in that Kaaba. And if you look, again, where are people who look at the Kaaba, they see nothing. Because they look with the eyes. But you as a Muslim, you look at it through the heart. You see this heavenly component in me and you looks at the Kaaba, which is the representation of every heavenly beauty and perfection, and therefore you can never have enough of the Kaaba. You see now Hajj people came, when you look at the Kaaba, everybody is crying, everybody is like inexpressible what's going on. Exactly, it's the representation of this beauty, representation of this meaning, the purpose, and that very spot was the reason for the creation of the entire universe. So it's something deeper with which we have to connect. Likewise, every other building again, when we construct, we have to inject this deeper dimension with which we later can connect. And that deeper, as we have said, is the implementation of all those values and principles and teachings throughout the process of erecting buildings. So that's house, that's Baytullah, and then we have Baytul Insan. Kaaba and every masjid actually is Baytullah, but then we have Baytul Insan, the house of God and the house of man. So now in architecture, in Islamic architecture, there is a very intriguing discussion as to the relationship between Baytullah and Baytul Insan. SubhanAllah, we have just mentioned Surah Nur, that's the last chapter, on housing. In Surah Nur, there is ayah where Allah says, Fi buyutin as in Allah and turfa wa yuzkar. But here, Fi buyutin, you see, Bayt singular, buyut plural. SubhanAllah. Check the Mufassirs. Mufassirs disagree as to the meaning of buyut here. Some say it's masjids. Some say, no, it's houses. No, masjids, houses. I said, yeah, that's it. You see, the relationship is so intricate, so powerful, that it's difficult to draw a line between where one stops, one takes over. You see, this is our masjid. But this is just a physical representation of masjid. The whole earth, dear brothers and sisters, is masjid. The Prophet says the whole earth has been made masjid. Yet the whole universe has been masjid. Therefore my life, your life, has to be kind of a masjid as well. And everybody's Kaaba, heart is to be kind of Kaaba. Your heart is to be a kind of Kaaba. Remember the Prophet when he was in Mecca, the Kaaba was under the control of kafirs, mushriks, right? Mushriks. Everybody wanted the Kaaba. Those mushriks wanted the Kaaba, right? Because that was the symbol. You have Kaaba, you have power. Our Prophet ﷺ also wanted the Kaaba to cleanse it, to purify it, right, from the elements of shirk. So they all want Kaaba. And there is this conflict of wishes in Mecca. They want Kaaba, the Prophet wants the Kaaba, right? Now, look at this. Strategically, people cannot understand it. Prophet wants the Kaaba, but he goes 600 kilometers away from the Kaaba. Medina, right? You see, he wants the Kaaba, right? He wants the Kaaba, but he goes 500 kilometers away from the Kaaba. Why? Because he knew that's just the physical manifestation of Kaaba. If I go somewhere where I can build in everybody's heart a Kaaba, Kaaba is mine. That's what proved 9 years later. He just walked in. See? There would be wars 9 years later, right? To get the Kaaba. No, I go away. Different interpretation of what Kaaba is. Later on, he just moved in, and Kaaba was his. So anyway, wonderful observation. The meaning of Kaaba, just symbol, representation. That's why we are facing it. We are facing it constantly in our lives, not just in our prayer. In our lives, our hearts are constantly facing the Kaaba. And we are enjoying it. That's the beauty. That's the beauty. Imagine people are directionless. That's a misery of life. Brother, exactly.
Dr. Omer, thank you very much. My question is about Fitra. Fitra. So, Qur'an, the last revealed book. Before that had been either we know or we do not know. Some prophets were given books or Subha or some not, Nabi, Rasul, etc. So the point is that historically people connected themselves to the above humanity, supernatural. So when we come today, your critic mainly enlightenment process. We know everywhere this is in the last 500 years. And the plus for this geography, Southeast Asia, colonialism. So the point is another point. Let's say when we visit a temple, non-Islamic temples, let's say cathedral in Canterbury, okay, or Greek church, we feel the same spirituality, probably based on the personal perceptions, the same what we feel, let's say, in Aceh, in Surau, or Baitur Rahman in Aceh, or Istiqlal Mosque in Jakarta, or over here, Masjid Negara. So the Fitra, even though the people who are not Muslim, their buildings, either secular or the religious buildings, have something closer to Islamic understanding because of Fitra. They do not claim I am Muslim or we are Muslim. Question is that. Thank you.
Okay. Jazakallah khair, brother. What's your name? Your name? Your good name? Mehmet. Mehmet. Arkadaş, yeah? Okay, very good point. Very good point. You see, when we look at the history of architecture, normally we see temples, we see churches, we see all those religious buildings where human architectural intelligence and talent have been poured into. Everything else perished except these temples. Even pyramids are kind of a temple. I mean, yeah, Pharaohs are there, but it's a kind of a temple. They're lasting. So anyway, again, the long story, short story, right? Yes, Fitra is inclined towards knowing God, yes. But we know the truth is one, right? The truth is only one. Now, anything other than truth is, well, it's falsehood, right? But now we have to admit there are levels of falsehood. like shirk is not like kufr. And shirk and kufr are not like nifaq, hypocrisy. And these are all not like being a follower of Christianity, Ahlul Kitab and Jews, right? Now, we feel inclined to search towards searching the truth. Now, we know where the truth is. Anything other than that is falsehood. We have to put it in our mind. It's falsehood. But if they are closer to our truth, maybe fitra is slightly inclined to it, but fitra knows and should know is the falsehood. For example, Allah says, Ahlul Kitab are closer to us than mushriks. It doesn't mean Ahlul Kitab are correct. Ahlul Kitab are Ahlul Kitab, right? Haqq is one, the rest is batil. But yes, we are closer to them because of them being somewhat closer to the truth, or having maybe less impediments, less obstacles between them and the truth. That's why, for example, see, dealing with a Christian is better for me as a Muslim than dealing with a mushrik, even a skeptic, even agnostic, even an hedonist. And that's why you feel actually nice when you see a church. Right? You don't feel nice, don't get me wrong. But you feel somehow a bit closer than, let's say, seeing these latest shopping centers that are temples of all these modern manifestations of paganism and shirk. I'll give you an example. I go with my wife to KL. Like Saturday, Sunday, in the morning. We go in the morning because, no people, no jam, right? Afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, time to come to Rahman. KL in general, right? So we go there, and then we go there, we immediately separate. She goes her way, pavilion and all this, right? KLCC, and then I go somewhere else, right? Now, after like 2-3 hours, she will go, right? Where are you? I'm done, okay, let's go. I hate those places. Never mind. I'll come to it. Once she called me and said, I'm done, where are you? My reply was, I'm in a church. I'm in a church. She said, the point here, yes, I was in a church. KL, there are those historic, just, the Medeka, there's that, I think, St. Mary, something that's small, very beautiful, I mean, yeah, church. So it was like this. These modern shopping centers, these are not shopping centers, people. These are temples of materialism, of consumerism, modernism. All these latest editions of kufr, shirk, paganism. So I always tell you, it's my wife, my wife. I always tell her, look, I'll go to pavilion just maybe to eat. The moment I finish, I'm out. I feel so restless because I see nothing but kufr and shirk here, man, come on. It's not Jaya Jasko, IIUM. These are family outlets, but these latest ones, they are temples. I feel so restless, and therefore, and I went to KL, right? Mosque, mosques in the morning are closed. 10 o'clock, no mosque is open. That beautiful Jamek, but they're closed. They will open like half an hour before Zuhr, right? Like 1:45. Yeah, and then the Gara also. This place is, so where to go? And I passed by a church and they were having Sunday. They were having their Missa, I went in and I felt happy. And I started, and I said, look, Qur'an says that believers are closer to Ahlul Kitab than to Mushrikun. These latest shopping centers are but manifestations of latest editions of shirk. I feel restless in them. I go to church, I'm okay. Just on the letter of the Qur'an, they are closer as Ahlul Kitab to us than to them. And that's the point. You see, when I see a church, I feel a bit, not really moved, but I feel nice. Why? Because, subhanAllah, even to some extent, some Chinese and Hindu temples, to some extent, you know why? Because all these are personification of any form of spirituality. Any form. This latest edition of shirk and kufr and paganism, they have no spirituality whatsoever. And if you are concerned about spirituality, you will feel like fish in the open when you go to these places. These are temples. Temples. Not just, of course they sell them on the shopping centers and all this. Of course you have to go there sometimes to buy things. But to go there on a pilgrimage every Sunday, pilgrimage, because we wake up and where to go? Let's go to these places, right? You see, it's a pilgrimage, as somebody said. Friday, all Muslims go to masjid, you know. But on Sunday, they all go to pilgrimage to the shopping center. It's a pilgrimage, right? So anyway, I understand the point. Yes, we feel, but with the level of closeness to the truth. But of course, one truth, the rest is batil. But then there is hierarchy, right, of how batil they are. Jazakumullah. Okay?
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor.
Barakallah feekum, thank you.
I believe that the last question. Any other question?
I think my question.
Okay, maybe this is the last one.
Not Muslim, a good Muslim, enlightened Muslim. If you are, well, non-Muslim, people are normally confined to the power of the five senses, empiricism. Five senses. Right? Now, beyond this, people don't see. Imagine a blind person, right? But blind. When somebody is blind sitting here, a blind person, and tell him, Merdeka spirit. You can tell him, wow, mashallah, look at these beautiful scarves inspired by Merdeka spirit. They're so beautiful. He will say, what? Yeah, this scarf, so beautiful, I really like them. Where did you buy them, sister? I want to buy it for my wife. You know, like, for example, right? So, but this guy, what are you talking about, right? Yeah, it's so beautiful, look at the colors, look at, you know, it looks like, I don't know, half like the flag, half, you know. Again, what are you talking about? Now, he will tell you, you are stupid because you are talking about things he doesn't see and don't exist, therefore, right? So likewise, when people are blind, the Quran says, it's not the eyes that are blind, but the hearts. That's what Quran tells us, right? And Islam is not only viewed through the eyes. Actually, if you view Islam through the eyes, you are finished. If we reduce Islam to the, you know, empirical, very low level, we are finished. We are doomed. Islam is to be viewed and experienced through the heart. Now, if people don't have this, it's very difficult to speak. It's very difficult to speak. A Muslim was speaking about Isra and Mi'raj. You know Isra and Mi'raj, right? I mean, this is just another spiritual thing. Architecture is spiritual, so is Isra and Mi'raj and everything else. And the other guy, a scientist, he said, come on, man. Do you know the distance between galaxies and stars? And do you know the fastest rocket, how fast it can go and how far it can go? And you speak about Isra and Mi'raj in the 7th century, somebody going to... And then you look at it, and he is speaking on behalf of science. But now when you hear the response, you actually start pitying the guy. Thinking, my goodness. He's so much stuck in matter, this lowly dimension of life, that he cannot think in terms other than machines. That's the only thing he can think about. So you just pity him. But he's a scientist, a Nobel Prize winner. You see, a Nobel Prize winner. But you actually pity him. And he's speaking a laughable stuff to you. Just as you actually speak laughable thing to him, so actually here there is not much discussion, really. Because you cannot convince a blind person about the beauty of colors, nor a deaf person about the beauty of whatever sound, right? So here when you have two people, come on. Remember Prophet Muhammad was operating both in Mecca and Medina. We always say Prophet Muhammad, look, those people, his greatest enemies, they knew him as he knew himself. Yet, they didn't believe. Abu Jahl, Abu Lahab, nobody believed. But they saw him with, why? Blindness. So there is no, you can't tell Abu Jahl, my God, stupid, how can't you see? No, exactly, he cannot see. You see, we always say like, can't you see? Exactly, he cannot see. Can't you hear? Exactly, he cannot hear, brother, end of discussion. That's why, talking about, you see, these are profound things. Honestly, these are profound. Okay, back to taqwa, right? You see, to talk about these things to somebody who does not subscribe to these, it's impossible. That's why sometimes we have to have an exit strategy. You know, maybe channel them to some secondary issues, secondary things, you know. Why is this masjid, a masterpiece? Why this aura I feel inside? Why? You see, it's very difficult to speak to a person who cannot see, who operates in another context, for whom perception is reality. For us, perception is not reality. Reality is as it is. Allah is the one who made reality, and we just follow what it is, not what we think it is. SubhanAllah, I just remember, this TV actually they're polluting, just as we have said about shopping centers. Shopping centers 50 years ago were not like today. TV 50 years ago is not like today. 50 years ago, with those black and white movies, they were different things. Now TV is corrupting us. TV is TV is ideologized. Media is ideologized today. It's not like 50 years ago. So anyway, I just remember, for example, I like to watch, History Channel, History Department. I mean those kind of educational, but actually they're not. So I just remember this like advertising a program. So one guy comes and says like, reality is not what, reality is not what it is. Reality is what you think it is. It's just a casual, but actually this is so profound and so dangerous. Reality is not what it is. Reality is what you think it is. It's that relativism today that is conquering the minds and souls of these innocent people nowadays. It's not good or bad because somebody says good and bad is because I say so. You see, I'm doing this because I want. That's it. No ustaz, no guru, no Qur'an, no hadith. Nobody is hovering over me. Nobody. This is true because I say so. And you're so proud of you. And you tattoo yourself. You go to gym. You color your hair. You look like a freak of nature. But you feel liberated. No, you feel despicable. But that's how it is. I mean, that's how you see. I mean, it's just as I told you. It's a casual. It's educational history, right? History Channel, right? Reality is not what it is, but what you think it is. And that's it. And today, tomorrow. But program along these lines in the same way. Program 1, 2, you tell your son or daughter, Quran. Right? Quran 1. Prophet, Smahyam, Tutu Aurat, right? They're questioning everything. Why? Because they are taught, they are trained to question everything. And that's why, back to what you just said, people without the Quran, there is no way forward. And Quran from the very beginning, we know how many hours we and our children spend on these gadgets. I don't want to use it this way because it's outdated. There's only one. I use it this way. These guys. But now you know. Like, I don't want to say this. I said that is. So my children keep telling me, "Come on, get a new one, Malu." It's okay, it's good. So anyway, we know how many hours all of us spend on this, right? We all know. And our children, the moment they're born, we dump this into their bosom. This is yours, and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Then when we are retired, 70 years later, then we go to Surah Mengaji Quran. Alif, and you're 70 years old. I'm sorry. No Islamic civilization in these environments. No Islamic civilization with this mentality. No Islamic civilization is Quran. SubhanAllah, Quran says on the tongue of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people took Quran mahjura. They have abandoned Quran. They have left it out and moving without it on their own. See, that's a scenario Quran warns us against. Quran is that, come on, it's our identity. Come on, it's us. It's our source of existence. And that's the message. Without Quran, there is, and by the way, everything is there. SubhanAllah, everything is there. Who knows that? Those who experience it. You see, some people's lives are so enlightened, so beautiful, so inspiring, so peaceful, so calm. Why? Because, they found it, right? Because we are all up to something. We're all looking for something. We all want to be happy. We all want to write. We all want to something. But then life becomes just, this incessant, endless chasing of shadows. As somebody beautifully said, subhanAllah. He said, I spend the whole, those restless souls. He said, I spend my whole life traveling around the world, looking for the source of happiness. Now, after I don't know how many years, I came back home just to find it at home. Right? To find it at home. Likewise, that's what we are. So we are not to live life according to our own wishes, but to the wishes of the Creator of life. See the discourse. We live life not according to your wishes. The question is, who are you? Who are you? By the way, what do we do on our own accord? Did you come to library whenever you want? Imagine you, I don't know who is chief librarian now. Brother, I want to come to the library at 3 a.m. I'm insomniac. I don't care, I want to come at 3 a.m. The answer will be, who the hell are you? Get out, right? We open at 9 and salam alaikum, brother. Or you go to bed, why are you closing at 4:30? I want to come at 5. You see, you're nobody, brother, sister. doesn't mean negative sense in nobody. Yeah, we are nobody. Now all of a sudden, vis-a-vis the creation of the universe, we want to be somebody. Excuse me? Excuse me? Yeah, exactly. You are not to, I mean, we, you, me. We are not to live life according to our wishes. Again, who are we? But to be according to the wishes of the Creator. Beautiful, isn't it? Just like who did this library, he has rules. Or I don't go to Singapore because I got funny rule. Papa, okay, good, you don't come, who cares? You see, you go to Singapore, there are rules. To Turkey, there are rules. Thailand, there are rules. Library, there are rules. Fair enough, right? Allah's earth, Allah's rules. What's the problem with this? Why can't we grasp this, subhanAllah? Sometimes you want to bang your head against the wall. Why can't we grasp this? And when you say, you are so obedient when you go to Singapore to come to library bank, right? Of course, that's a sign of civilization. We are civilized people, civilized manner, But then when it comes to Allah's earth, then you want to be Jack. You want to behave on your own. No, I'm sorry. This is Allah's earth. A wise sheikh advised his student, disciple, he said, look, I'll give you a license to do whatever ma'asiyat, whatever evil you want to do. I'll give you a license. But provided you go to earth other than Allah's. You breathe somebody else's air, not Allah's air. You eat somebody else's risky, not Allah's risky. And you live life who gave somebody else who gave you, not Allah's life. If you get all these, I'll give you license, do anything you want. So that's, again, built environment architecture, as we have said. Allah created the universe. Beautiful, perfect. That's simple worldview. Placing us in charge of earth as Khalifas on earth. And telling us, now go. Enjoy yourself. And whatever you do, remember, must comply with the existing, preceding standards and criteria. And just carry on, enjoy yourself. Jazakumullah khair, Jazakumullah. Shukran Azir Library, thank you so much. Thank you for listening.